You don't think they'll cry if you say that.
Good evening. Welcome to all of you. My name is Melanie McNair. I'm the Senior Director of Public Programming here at the Center for Fiction. How many of you are joining us for the first time this evening? Oh, amazing. You're all welcome. The Center for Fiction is the only literary nonprofit in the United States that solely focuses on the creation and enjoyment of fiction. And we do this through public events like this one, reading groups, writing workshops, our Kids Read program, our first novel prize, and our Emerging Writers Fellowship. Please follow us on social media and sign up for our mailing list so you don't miss anything happening here because there's always stuff happening here. And to support our work, please consider becoming a member and enjoy all the perks that come with membership. I want to take a pause and introduce my friend Marcia, who is one of our co-presenters tonight. She is the founder of the Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Melanie. The Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival, a lot like the Center for Fiction, is unique in the work that we do. We are the only literary festival dedicated to exclusively showcasing and promoting Caribbean writing, which makes sense for a place like Brooklyn because this is the largest concentration of Caribbean people outside of the region itself. And Brooklyn is a doorway, a gateway. Even if we end up in Idaho, somehow Caribbean people pass through Brooklyn. So it just kind of makes sense for us to do this. Caribbean people also have been we're at the tip of the spear. We're at the front of every single political, social, economic movement. There's Shirley on Netflix right now. And it's my extreme honor to be able to partner with a big engine like the Center for Fiction to get our stories and these things come to fruition with events like the one that we're doing tonight, where we have two of the most iconic writers of our canon. um, I their names alone open doors, and their names alone um, really reflect the respect that our work deserves. And they've toiled really hard. So we have a festival that occurs every September, the weekend after Labor Day, and we do lots of events with the Center for Fiction. You can find us at Brooklyn Caribbean Lit Fest online and on Instagram and with the Center for Fiction. So I'm not going to keep y'all too much tonight with my little spiel, but thank you so much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the opportunity, Melanie. Good night.
All right. A quick welcome to those of you who are joining us on the live stream as well. After the talk tonight, we will have an audience Q&A, and if you're here, please raise your hand, and one of our fabulous interns will bring a microphone to you. That's so the people who are watching at home can hear you as well. And let's see, there is no, all the books are pre-signed. Julia will not be doing personalization afterwards. She's at the very start of a very long book tour, so we want to send her out healthy. Tonight is a very special event for us for many reasons, and one of them is that we have some students here from the Cornelia Connolly Center who are on a field trip to meet Julia. Right there up front, ready to raise their hands for the Q&A. And also in 2019, this building opened, and we had the honor of hosting Julia Alvarez for the 30th anniversary edition of How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents. And we also hosted Edwidge Danticat for her book, Everything Inside, two amazing events. And we also had the first Caribbean Literary Festival that year in our space. And so tonight, all three are here together, and all of you are here with us. And so without further ado, please welcome these two icons to the stage.
Here we are. I can. Lord. Thank you. That's a good turnout. Oh, hi, Julia.
Hey,
What a wonderful turnout. Thank you all for coming out of the rain, too. Yeah. Welcome, a special welcome to the students. Welcome, students.
where are you?
Right
Oh,
there.
there you are. Great.
Whoa.
Good.
All right. So this is Julia's publication day. It's a big deal, right? Because Pub Day is like when you let this baby fly and go out into the world. Is that exciting, or is it like, how do you, like, what's that like for you?
Well, as you know, we birth it way in advance of when it goes out to the world, but when it goes out to the world, it's official. You can't take it back.
Yeah. As much as you might want to, like, correct.
Oh, change this, change that. So it's amazing, and I've had, I mean, a book gets out there, but there's a whole team that is getting it there, and then they all seem to disappear, and you get all the attention. So I've had my editor, Amy Gash, Michael Mackenzie, our publicist, Katrina, Stuart, I mean, all these people, they've just been doing all this work. So it feels a little odd to get all the attention.
Yeah.
And you hope that it will, find homes in the minds and imaginations of readers. That's where it really ends up, if it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in typical style for you, I think it becomes also a moment of gratitude. And I just really want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to you, because you have been, I want to say we've been on this journey together, but it's more like you've been on this journey with me since I was a baby writer.
Yeah, I remember.
And so,
I remember Baby at the beach.
And so I want to just say it in front of everyone, like, to express my gratitude to you and what you represent for me and this sort of whole generation that follows you, not just as Kiskeans, like from this same island, but also like for everybody, like who you've blazed the trail for and for your generosity. So I want to say, before we get into the questions, I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, one of the things that I love about our community is that, talk about Caribbean, we have a sense of our ancestors, those who come before us. And I always notice that many female writers and female writers of other origin countries have long acknowledgments, because we have a lot of people to thank, and we know that we got here because all these people helped us. And there's that sense of that ancestry too, our literary ancestors as well.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I wanted, because today we lost, like in Creole, we would say "Oma pou tombe," like a great big tree has fallen. Maïs Condé passed away today. And I wanted to start with a question inspired by Maryse, which I think it was really interesting coming across that particular quote from her today, because I think in a way it really also describes the cemetery of untold stories in an independent store near you. So Maryse was once asked about the oral story tradition in the Caribbean, and which begins with, in Haiti, it would be creek, crack, and I felt like it sort of speaks to what's at the center of your book. So when she asked about that, the storytelling tradition, Maryse answered, quote, "Every writer is jealous of the storyteller. There's in the spoken word a spontaneity that writing brings to an end. I wanted to remind my readers that I still belong to a society where all traditions are still alive, where my words convey a magical power, and my story can be seen as a wonderful filter for emotions and knowledge. I was trying to say that people from my part of the world do not simply write, they retain the power to influence the minds of their listeners deeply." So as I was preparing for this, having read the book over the summer, I kept thinking that description can also be like a possible description for this book. Am I way off track?
Oh, not at all. When I went to an MFA program and you would be asked about your literary ancestors, and I always felt like I wasn't really a reader. I wasn't a born, writer. I wasn't a bookworm. And I always thought that somehow I was deficient. And then as I learned more and more, I realized that everything that I was being taught about pacing, about character, about humor in a story, I had learned in childhood from storytellers, oral storytellers. Many of them didn't know how to read or write, but they already knew this stuff in their bones, and this transmission that goes on and goes on and goes on is part of what flows in my writing. And so I think with the Cemetery of Untold Stories, the reason Alma, the main character, goes back is because many of the stories that she's written down, their root system is back in the Dominican Republic, in the Caribbean, and she wants to lay them to rest there. And it's also an acknowledgement for those of us who are writing in English, in the United States, but come from other cultures. There's always a sense of, I don't know, at least it's grown more with me, that here I brought these stories. I mean, of course I made them up, but so much of it is also from, those traditions. And I brought them to the delectation of what we call the first world. And, just like there's a brain drain and, people leave for political reasons, but the sense that the stories really come from there, and that place doesn't always get the credit, So there's that sense of connecting back to where the root system of my writing came from. And yeah, we're an amazing oral storytelling culture. I mean, in the DR, during the dictatorship, every avenue, radio, television, whatever, was owned by the dictatorship. But the story still spread through what people call Radio Bemba, Radio Big Mouth. Everybody spread the stories and knew what was going on. So it's an amazing, rich culture. When people talk about magical realism, you think, it's not an academic term. I mean, it's the way reality is there, When I gave my father 100 Years of Solitude to read, I said, Papi, they call that magical real. I was showing off because I was in graduate school and I had a term for it. I said, Papi, that's magical realism. That's the way we live. That's what our countries are like, So it's part of our culture and our DNA and our cell system, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is going to be an easy crowd. So in your nonfiction, I remember reading your fiction, and then you have always seemed to provide for us a way to read you. And going from the oral storytelling to a story that you cite often, which also comes up in this book, is the story of Sherazade, another kind of storyteller. How have you, over this very long career, from the Vermont to different parts of the Dominican Republic, including the mountains, how has that journey been from the oral storytelling to Sherazade, and then through your getting to what you needed to say in these novels?
Well, Sherazade, do all of you know who she was, Sherazade? Have you heard of the Arabian Nights? Right? So Sherazade was a woman that was young woman living in a kingdom where the Sultan was murdering all the women. He would take one every night, have his way with her. In the morning, he would decapitate her, kill her. And so he was going through all the women, and Scheherazade volunteered one night to be one of the women. And when she got in front of the Sultan, she said, would you like to hear a story? Because you always had them decapitated at dawn, and the sun hadn't risen. And she said, would you like to hear a story before my end? And he said, yeah, go ahead. And she told a story and he was riveted. And she started another story, and the sun came up. She said, well, I guess we'll just have to stop. You won't hear the ending. And so he said, no, 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 no. You live another night to finish that story. So savvy girl, she told the end of that story and started a new one. Just as the sun was coming up for 1,001 nights. That's why it's called 1,001 Nights. I mean, dumb Sultan, he didn't figure out. But what happened is he fell in love with her. And his heart supposedly was changed. And he stopped being the misogynist he was. And Scheherazade not only had saved herself, but all the women in her kingdom through her storytelling. And I wasn't a reader, flunked every grade through 5th grade, but I had an auntie who read, and she gave me a picture book of Scheherazade. And I was mesmerized. I wanted to be Scheherazade. I wanted to save all the women, telling stories. So I think, I never had a literary background, but that little seed was in my imagination of that stories have power, that you could change people, that you could transform people through storytelling. And I wanted that. So I think she's been my muse, through everything. And that combination of activism and art, because she was a storyteller, but she was an activist, I've always really appreciated that. I mean, I think in many of our cultures in the so-called third world, you can't just be, it's political to be an artist. I mean, the minute a dictator that gets in power, they don't want those people that are opening up minds and imaginations. So it's always a political act. It's not even something you choose, but I've always liked that idea that, you're not just for yourself, but you're working within a community, and to empower it. And that's been important. So Scheherazade has really been a model and a muse for me.
So from Scheherazade to the main character of this book, Alma. So Alma, I mean, I don't want to give too much away. That's the dilemma. So as you go in the book tour, the questions will get more and more specific about the book, but I don't want to give too much away. But Alma is a writer who decides that to open this space for the untold stories, but at the same time, stories are being told, and she returns to the Dominican Republic in the barrio for this with this story. I'm butchering the paraphrasing because I'm avoiding spoilers. So how did Alma come to you?
How did Alma come to me? So hard to figure out how. I was very interested in elders as I grow old, because I know that we all are going to grow old, but what makes an old woman or a man an elder? What is that transformation? And I always read wanting to understand the new landscape I'm entering. And I found, there are many books out there, but I found it often that there was an ageism in fiction, that the elder or the old person was just like, person you go and consult, or the person in the first page who dies and gives away their money, or whatever, and then the new generations take over. But I'm interested in that character of what is it like to be, an old, not a cliche, the process of getting old. And with this character, Alma, the process of getting old in a craft that you've spent your life and passion in. How do you, fiction writers like to give things a shapely form. How do you give your own life at the end a shapely form? How do you end? How do you lay it to rest? And when you're a young writer, you have all these folders and all these boxes, and you're thinking of, someday I'm gonna write this story, someday I'm gonna do that. And then you realize you're not going to go back and keep those promises to those characters or that story. So what do? Because in our cultures, you're, possessed. We call it being mounted in Santeria. You're possessed by your characters, your story. And how do you lay them to rest? How do you make peace with not being able to tell their stories? So that's where the Cemetery of Untold Stories, the idea comes, that if she takes them back to their origin country, the Dominican Republic, and literally buries them, that they'll be laid to rest. But that saying that you hear at protests, rallies for immigrant rights, they tried to bury us. They did not know we were seeds. Well, in this novel, she tried to silence us. She did not know we were stories. You can't silence a story. It will appear. It will come up. So that's the thing. The cemetery is full of stories, and all they need is a good listener to listen to them.
And she, more than anybody, should have known better, right? That
Yeah.
And the book opens with an invitation that is carried out through with the different characters, with the different untold stories. It's tell me a story. So what do we gain by telling our stories? Because we do come also from these cultures where you can embarrass your people by telling stories. You can shame your family. So what do we gain by telling a story, and what do we lose by not doing so? Because I think that's one of the questions that Alma and all the the different folks in the story are wrestling with. But like, what does silence cost us? And
yeah. And part of the thing, the novel doesn't have any answers to those questions really, but it's a kind of meditation on those questions. There are things that trouble us as writers if we're, conscionable in parts of community, and we grew up in a culture, a repressive culture, a dictatorship, where to speak the story meant your whole family could be killed, to say the wrong thing. So there's a reason for silence, but the silence also keeps the oppression going. So the story has to be told, but it's an immense responsibility to take on, and it's easy for us from this culture to tell the story that someone back home to tell, their life would be endangered. That was a reality. So, but the problem is still there. What do you keep silent? Because part of it is that you keep things entre familia, in your community. It's just, they don't shut up in the family, right? The stories are going. They're giving you all this material, and then you write it down, and they're furious, because it's entre familia. You keep it close. It's part of the richness what you have. Those bonding stories, and so I don't think for me there's never been a right answer. But I think to keep the question alive as you write is for me the right stance, to consider it, and to, when you take that responsibility, to know you're doing so. And one of the quotes that Alma has and that Alvarez has had is that quote from the Gnostic Gospels: if you bring forth what is inside you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is inside you, what is inside you will destroy you. Because there is a gift, there's something in all of us. So wonderful to see 8th graders nodding like they already get it. Yes. It took me like 40 years to get it, But seriously, that you're born with something, I've been telling this, I'm doing this Caribbean thing where I can't, one story goes to another.
Oh no, that's the idea.
That's the idea. But I taught these the National Endowment for the Arts had this program in the 70s called Poetry in the Schools, and they sent you all around the country. And not just to schools. I went to juvenile detention centers. I went to prisons. I went to a convent. I went to these things called Sunshine Centers in North Carolina, and they were at the basements of churches, and old folk would come, and they'd get a hot meal, and they get some bonuses from being there, and they would spend the day. So I was sent as an enrichment, to give an enrichment class on poetry to these people. Well, nobody told me they didn't know how to read or write, so I went with my books and everything, and I had to throw all that out. But they told stories. They all told stories, and I'd write them down. And where I don't know where this came from, in answer to what question, but there was this old man who said, told me the story about, he said, when I was a boy, I really liked lightning bugs. And I wanted to know what made the lightning bug light. So I caught a lightning bug, and I smashed it open, and the light went out. And he went to his grandma, and he said, "Grandma, nobody tell me what makes the lightning bug light." And the grandma said, "Boy, stuff is in him." So stuff is in each of you. Stuff is in you. And if you get it out, the light doesn't go out.
Yeah.
But if you keep it in, smash, it's over.
Wow.
So it's, something that's almost like, it's not just for you. It's you were brought here to light it up.
Yeah. I think, just hearing you describe it this way makes me think that Alma is trying not to keep the stuff that's in her to herself. Like even the burying of the stories, and then which opens the space for others to tell their stories. Is that part of, because there's two ways I think to read the book: as a writer who sort of wants to exit the stage, who's grieving the loss of a friend, who has decided to go home and bury these stories in the soil from which they came, and then they're not buried, but they're seeds. But is that also a way of sharing, of going, of that stuff that's in you, of sharing it with others, as sort of this which blossoms in the pages of the book as well? This is like a muddled question, but how is part of the process of the book sharing that stuff that's in her, with her community, with...
Well, I think that I tried that as the novel progresses, Alma becomes more and more ghost-like and is disappearing, and the stories are really have taken over. So it's, I don't know that she intended it, but as she lets go, once they're buried and they're taken in by the surrounding barrio, especially Filomena, the caretaker, there's less and less of Alma. And, I think that I've always said, when they wring me dry and it's the end, I don't want a drop of story to be in me. I was like, one more day, because there's one more drop. But of course, you don't get to tell all the stories, but it doesn't matter, because après moi is not le silence. There's Edwidge, there's Angie Cruz, there's Liz Acevedo, there's people coming up, and that's wonderful. It just, we're just one of the ones, along the trajectory.
And is that fading, like for Alma, in the way you're describing it? I know you've talked about like yourself becoming an elder. Is that part of being an elder, sort of like moving back to the stage, and how do I know when I should do it?
You shouldn't. Some people should never stop. I don't know, but I think it's important. I think I think I think part of the thing is to know also, someone sat in your first row and gave you a little standing ovation. Maybe it was just your auntie or your sister, but that there's a wonderful movement to enjoying the new generations and seeing them flourish and being amazed at what you didn't know when they were their age. They're just, I think there's a stepping back, and it's it's okay to be silent. I don't think I'll ever stop writing because it's how I process experience and how I make meaning. So it's not something I'm going to stop, but I think it's also wonderful to nurture. I mean, you're doing that now. You're teaching, you're nurturing. People read your books and come to you. So it's, there's more and more as your writing career spreads, more and more of those to be nurtured and to listen to and to celebrate, what they're,
Yeah, I think that's just sort of like the way the communal, our communities work, right? That is normal. I think what I see like being addressed in the book is that sense of like, and you've talked about it in one interview that I read about writing older characters, where you said it's that like it's gradual, and then suddenly you're like, no, I don't have to be interviewed for everything. I don't have to be at every party. Like even that desire fades, right? Like,
it's, it's so hard in a culture that celebrates celebritydom, it's sort of like a person that doesn't accept that they're aging and that they're changing and their bodies are changing and so forth. That happens also in the life of the imagination and in the writing. And to acknowledge that and to say, no, I don't have to be front row center. I don't have to be that person. I can, I can step back. I think, Ruby Sales, the African American activist that worked with MLK, talked about aging and being an elder. She said, it's no fun. Your knees are giving out, your back, you're all aches, you can't see. But let me tell you, from where I sit on the front porch, I have hindsight, and I have foresight, and I have insight. That's 360 degrees. And that's true. There's that. And so you see things in more perspective, and yourself in more perspective.
And what about the work? How do you see it from that perspective?
What you've done or what you want to do?
All of it.
Oh, I have so many times that I say, well, don't entertain any more possible things because there's not enough time. And I think, oh, but this one, this one story. And that's when I know that the stuff is in me. Twice in my life, I've really come up against realizing, there's no quitting this.
It won't
once
quit
when
you.
I was young, right. That's it too. They're there. Once when I was a young woman, and now as an older woman, that I realized, if they say, if this is the last day of your life, what do you want to do? I want to write.
Wow. That's really beautiful. Before, I keep thinking, it's still 7 minutes, but it's 7:40 something. Before we get to the audience questions, the last line in your acknowledgments is to readers. And I just want to read it. It says, and to all of you, mostly invisible and anonymous readers, without whom all my stories would have ended up in Alma's cemetery. Thank you for the resurrections you have given me and
yeah.
continue to give my books by reading them and using them to fertilize the ground your own creations spring from. So before we hear from your readers, how has your relationship to your readership changed from the time people were squashing bugs and fighting their to and fighting what was inside of them to now?
Well, I only meet them when they let me out, like now. So I just imagine, I know that I write in community. I don't write just for myself or whatever. I'm very much thinking of, not as I write, I'm thinking about my characters and my stories, but that I really, what brings the second half of the writing of the book is to share it with the reader. And it makes me realize how I've been around for a while. When at first people would say, "Oh, I love your book. Oh, my mom loves your book.
Oh, my grandma
loves your
yes.
book."
That's starting to happen to me.
Yeah, right.
They'll say I read it in high school. I'm like, you don't mean college? No, they're like, no, middle school even.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah. But anyhow, so it's just, it's our legacy. It's we threw these seeds out, and I'm so grateful when the seeds have gone into an imagination that holds it close. That's what we work for, right?
Yeah.
It's not the prizes. It's not being up on stage. It's when you're alone, reading a book by Edwidge, by Angie, by me, by Maurice Conde, and it just shifts things around in you, and you come out of the book a different person than when you, by infinitesimal things, you might not even notice it, a different quality to your perception of the world. That to me is what we are really working for. And the other stuff can be wonderful. I'm not minimizing it, because it gets you to more readers maybe, but it's that intimate connection with a reader that matters the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, and it's an honor, and it's like
it is.
These young people.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's fantastic. So questions. We're open now for your questions.
Don't be shy. If we're allowed to be shy, I'm going out the door, because it's.
All it takes is one brave first person. Okay,
Yeah.
I think you have to get the mic for the people at home.
How are you? I'm standing in gratitude again as an educator. I'm an English teacher, and both of you are in my anthology. So to have both of you on stage tonight, my particular class this year is a freshman class, and they enjoyed Snow and Untwinned or Entwined. Mm-hmm. And so my question is, how do we continue the connection? I sometimes have a problem with this generation coming out of the pandemic. We're still affected by this in the educational community. I just was wondering about how do we begin to make a connection between our young people and the desire for these intimate moments. As you mentioned, I don't think they know that it can be that intimate. So I guess the question is kind of, how do we, kind of hook them into knowing how intimate it can be, and what a blessing it can be to be a reader and to be exposed to such great storytelling. What would be just one thing that we could do to connect the young people to such profound literature?
Oh, that's a toughie. Edwidge is doing that now. I've retired from teaching, so it's a hard one. It's connecting them. I think one of the things that I found is if you connect a student with, it doesn't have to be a big classic that's scary, but a book that speaks to them. You start something going, and that means being flexible as a teacher because you're given, so often you're given the curriculum, they have to do this, 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 and this. And so, you get them in that grid and you lose them. You lose them. So how to connect them with books and stories that really will make meaning for them. So that, I was terrible as a kid. I didn't read, I hated school, I was always flunking out. And then my auntie gave me the Arabian Nights. And I thought, wow, So I think that personal, taking an interest and connecting with that particular student with a book. I just read that article about Tommy Orange was in the Bronx. Did any of you read that? And he used this class. He used this impassioned teacher. I was so impressed. 12:30 at night. What was it? An 800-word email. Who reads an 800-word email? Wrote it to the publicist and he said, my students, Tommy Orange's They're There novel, he's their hero, he's their superhero. And he went. And those students were right there. And one of the comments I remember that struck me was somebody said, it's almost like they weren't reading a book for English class. That would have been a bad thing. Isn't it something to say? It was like it wasn't a book for English class. It was a lifesaver, And too often we're thinking we've got to educate them on these classics or these assigned books and meet them where they're at, right? I wasn't always able to do that because I would get the curriculum from the chair of my department and that's what we had to cover. But I have one of my students sitting over there, so I'm a little nervous what she said.
Well, she's here.
Said,
that's saying a lot.
Yeah, but she said, "Oh, you gave me a hard time with my writing. One more revision. Yeah."
I think we have another.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Matthew. I'm originally from Iowa. You're actually like the first like Latina of color I ever read because I lived in a cornfield. Yeah, they just didn't have those kind of books out there. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. What? Alvarez? What? Okay, so changed my life.
Was it in school that you read it, or you picked it up on your own?
A little bit of both. It was like this like speech program. It was in high school when I first read my first person of color fiction book. And I had to like pick up a short story for like this competition thing, and it ended up being like a read through this like textbook in like from the Spanish classroom. And I'm like, okay. And I saw, okay, Julia Alvarez's short story. I'm like, wait, this goes very well with the poem I wrote about first generations. Oh my gosh. And then like I ended up getting like top of the state that year. It was crazy. But I'm like, yo, this is kind of cool. There's other writers who write about this stuff. Oh, wow. Anyways, I was like, I opened my eyes like freshman, sophomore year. My question is, why Alma? Because, that name has multiple meanings when it comes to like Spanish translated to English, like the love, the life, the soul. Like, why Alma for the name?
Well, I don't know what you do, Edwidge. I go through all kinds of lists. What am I going to name her? And then you name her something and it just doesn't fit. And when I landed on Alma, although her pen name is Scheherazade, because she has to appease family critics, so she writes under the pen name. But yeah, I all the sisters they all have names, Consuelo, Amparo. These names we give that if you translate them into English, they're so strange. Soul, refuge, yes. Concepcion, conception. And then we do these amalgamate names where we join the father's name with the mother's name and we throw in something else, and it's just. But so I'm not, this. I mean, of course, um, I know that it means soul, and this is the evolution of the soul of this writer. So there was that going on. But sometimes the characters just insist on a name that works for them, even though you want to name them something else. And this one seemed to fit for this character. I don't know.
We have a young person.
Here.
Hi.
Hi there.
So In the Time of the Butterflies is the novel that like me and my classmates both like know most about. And as someone who aspires to be an author, what did you learn from writing In the Time of the Butterflies that you applied to the summary of Untold Stories?
Oh boy.
Whoa.
Boy, this is the toughest question. Wow. Boy, it's, we don't think, I know it's there, layers of sediment. Everything you write, even if it fails, you're learning things that you can apply to the next and the next book, right? So I'm sure the things I learned in that book, and then now I look back and I think, oh, I would do it a little different. But I needed to write that book to have this sense of I would do it a little different now. But I think one of the things, well, personally, one of the things with In the Time of the Butterflies that helped me was to understand the generation of my parents. They were known as the lost generation in the DR because they came of age and were there. The dictator was there for 31 years, and they grew up in that repressive system. And so I didn't understand why we were in New York. My sisters and I were, it was the 60s. We were hippie girls, and mommy and papi couldn't understand it. And I just thought, come on, get over it, But then writing that book really gave me insight into what my parents had gone through. And maybe it politicized me because I realized that, this story had not gotten out, and the getting out of it began to be transformative for readers and people who learned the story of the Mirabar sisters. So I think I became aware that, I mean, I should have known that if Scheherazade is my muse. I mean, she saved the kingdom, right? But I wasn't thinking that way. I just thought, I'm just needing to write this novel because this story is haunting me. But that I learned something about the power of story, which I knew in an abstract way, but writing that. And the Cemetery of Untold Stories is about the power of stories, but not always in a positive way, because we know stories can be used for good or evil. So we have to be responsible storytellers and be sure that our storytelling is not used for the wrong purposes. And what those might be, I don't know. I mean, I always think I've had several of my books banned, and I think of it as a badge of honor because it means that something's working in them, because people want to shut things down that are opening up minds, right? Right? And so it's important. But I'll keep thinking about that question. I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I can text you. Except that I don't really, it would be too long an answer to text. Yeah. Right? Oh.
Hi, my name's Avery, and I wanted to know how did writing novels impact your life?
Whoa. How did it impact my life? Oh boy. My first novel, the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents, didn't get published till I was 41. And I was already, as a teenager, wanting to be Shahrazad. I wanted to write, I wanted to be a storyteller. But it wasn't a culture that was yet, publishing other kinds of voices. Now there's a big boom, multicultural voices, ethnic voices, voices from around the world, but that wasn't so. So I was writing very much because this is what I did. But I didn't think that I would ever have readers, that I would ever get published. And then when Garcia Girls came out, I was 41. I've been doing it for a long time. And I think, oh my gosh, I wish it had happened sooner, But then I think, no, it proved to me that I was doing it because I couldn't do something else. It didn't go to my head. I mean, I knew as my writing life has developed, sometimes your novel's going to get bashed, sometimes it's going to get celebrated, sometimes, that's weather. That it comes and goes. But if you're doing it, then there's a deep satisfaction. So that's really the impact it's had on my life. The gratitude and the privilege of being able to do what I love to do. Not everybody, most of the world doesn't get to do that. And I'm very aware of that privilege. And it is a privilege to be able to do it and to be able to make a living out of it. Because you can do it, but then you have to have a dozen other little jobs to be able to support your passion. But to be able to do it, I think it's what I wish for everybody here. To be able to do the thing you really love and are passionate about doing.
If you can go to this side.
Keep going.
Hi, I'm Ara Fernandez, and I'm a fellow Dominican from Santiago, even though I have lived here most of my adult life. But first, I would like to wish you a very happy birthday, belated birthday. Hope your birthday was a very
You mean the
happy
book?
one. Yes.
Your actual
No,
birthday?
Oh, my actual birthday.
yes, your birthday,
Well,
according to the website, is on the 27th of March, unless at a stage birthday. But
I wish we could have been born the same day. That would have been so cool.
we can only wish, right?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to thank you for being such an inspiration, and for your birthday and all this, I wish that la Virgencita de la Altagracia te acompañe y te
you.
proteja siempre. And I do have a question though. Is it Alma, the writer in your Cemetery of Untold Stories, Alma Cruz, the same Alma as the writer in the Saving the World? Or is a complete different writer, Alma writer?
Did I name her Alma? Do they have the same name? Oh my God. That's when you know you've been old in a profession. you can't remember your baby's names. No, I think this Alma is I think this Alma is an older, more at the end of the writing life, more than in that frantic activist kind of stage of that earlier Alma. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. So, but I'm sure there are, there's similarities. There's, all your characters, however much you make them different, they have some of your DNA. They have to, You come out of your imagination, and so they have your imaginative DNA. So I'm sure there are similarities, but I see Alma as a writer who is, in a way, realizing that the stories are bigger than she is, and that part of the thing that happens in the book is that the stories start taking over beyond her control or management. And I think that um, I don't know that I would have been comfortable as a younger writer admitting that they were out of my control. You know, I thought there was more keeping them on a leash. And I think this Alma is letting it go and realizing, you know, at a point in the book, she realizes that when you shut up, the world all around is telling you stories, and you shut up and listen. And sometimes, as the writer, you have the microphone, and it's interesting what lies beyond the management as a storyteller. That's why the novel starts by tell me a story, and the only way you can get into the cemetery of untold stories is press the intercom at the gates, and the voice says, "Tell me a story." And if you tell a good enough story, you're allowed to go in. But everybody, I mean, scratch the surface of any person, and the stories are there. That reminds me of your question as a teacher. And sometimes the best material is in the students to get them to tell their stories and those to be beginning of what everyone is reading.
We have time for one more question from our live audience and then one from our virtual audience.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Santos. I want to thank the both of you because both of you are such incredible and powerful women. And thank you. Thank you for being the light and speaking for those that have gone through experiences such as being immigrants. And just thank you. Thank you for being a voice for the Caribbean. My question to the both of you is if you were to create a soundtrack to your life, what would be the first song on that soundtrack?
Oh my God. That's a toughie. Gracias a la vida. You know that song? Yeah. I can't sing with bees, so I won't. Mercedes Sosa and Violeta Barra also does a beautiful, yeah.
I mean, I guess for me, especially now, it would be Haïti chérie, puis bel pays passé un point.
What are the translate?
It's beloved Haiti, there's no place like you. I had to leave you before I could understand you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Who wrote that? It's a contemporary song?
It's like a folkloric song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, wow, I had to leave you before
I could understand you. Fwa mwen te kite ou so I could understand your value. Fwa mwen te kite ou pou mte ka kompren valeur.
Wow. Wow. That could be
So much.
No. For many of us that have left our origin countries, you go away and you see it in a fuller way. Yeah.
And a question from our virtual audience is, what is your advice to authors whose first language is not English? How can they overcome imposter syndrome?
Wow. Imposter syndrome.
Does one ever overcome it?
What?
I said, does one ever overcome imposter?
Yeah.
I think you have to just learn to live with imposter syndrome because it's not all the time, but in certain instances you feel there's that feeling. But I don't think it should be because of like your lack of language skills or because I think one of the things that when I started writing that I saw in your work and like Sandra's work is that the fact that this other language that I speak could also exist in the work, right?
Very good. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say that I'm writing my Spanish in English, you know, because our rhythms and the way we hear the syntax and how we put something together, it's not that you left the other thing behind and now you're totally cut off. It gets into your writing. But by imposter, Well, the person isn't here, so we can't ask. Do they mean that you're pretending to be something you're not?
No, it's
No.
more like you don't feel worthy, like you don't feel good enough.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah, I get that one. Yeah. No. No, yeah. Yeah, because I would always feel like, oh, I didn't start off with everyone else. English was not my first language. You know, I wasn't, it didn't come with mother's milk. And actually, when I went to a writers' conference early on, there was a very famous writer whom I loved his work. And so what he said was the law. And he said no writer could ever write, if no writer could ever write in a language they hadn't first said mama in. I thought, oh my gosh, that's like me. You know, I mean, then
Yeah.
I didn't say mom, you know, I said mommy or whatever. So there was that sense I'm not allowed in. And also when the first novel wasn't published till I was 41 and kept getting rejected, a sense that I don't belong, you know, and that can get into your head and make you feel. So that's why, you know, wonderful writers like yourself, like others that you read, you feel accompanied and you can see that it's done. For me, it was Maxine Hong Kingston, the woman warrior, realizing that, yeah, I could do this. We can tell our stories.
Yeah.
So, but it is, you feel that.
That imposter thing, right?
Yeah. But when you're inside with your characters, they just want everything from you. They don't care who you are. You're willing to put those 6-7 hours into realizing their story and listening to them. I think they.
And then, and like, as in this book, at an independent store near you, they, they sometimes they bust out and tell their stories themselves.
Yeah, right.
Or seem to.
Or seem to. And by the way, it's also because my Spanish editor is here, and the book is also out in Spanish at the same time.
At the same time.
So if your abuelita doesn't want to read it in English, if your mom doesn't want to read in English, if your great grandmother, I'm starting to feel. I had a copy of the cover at least.
Oh, it's different.
Oh no, it's
Oh, it's the writing.
we went
is in
around and
Spanish.
around
Okay.
for what the title should be. El cementerio. Cementerio de los cuentos sin contar. ¿Sí lo tiene ahí? No. Oh my God, she was my voice.
Ah!
No,
In Spanish?
she did the audiobook for.
I'm on Audible, yes. So it's already, the sample is there and everything. It's amazing, by the way. It's an icon. And I have to say, I had such an amazing time creating each and every single character.
Oh, because there's many voices in here. Oh my God. Did you do Manuel Cruz? Did you do Manuel Cruz? Did you do the male?
Cruz, I did Bienvenida, which was amazing. It was one of my favorite
You
ones.
did the male voice?
Filomena?
Too? Oh,
Yes, I did.
Yeah, wow.
So it was just amazing, and I have to say, it's so important, especially for our newer generations, to understand a lot of the history. It's such a blessing. There are a lot. My name is Altagracia.
Yeah.
And I felt that it was Altagracia Nova, and I felt that it was meant to be, and I felt that I had so much that I educated myself on that I didn't know about our history, about my parents, and their generation, and it was just such a blessing.
Wow,
I had
thank
such
you.
an amazing. I wouldn't sleep at night creating the colors of these characters, and I have to say, you are such a legend and an amazing influence on so many
Thank you. It's so weird. It's like if Filomena got up and said, "I'm Filomena," she's me.
Wow.
She's me. She's my voice.
Wow.
Okay.
That's
I
great.
really enjoyed Filomena. That was one of my favorite ones
Yeah,
too.
one of the characters. She's one of the characters in the novel Filomena.
And do you mind if I ask you one question? Well,
No,
maybe
no.
it's too late.
No, I don't think
Well,
we
I
can
just
stop
got-
you now.
I know. I just got the word, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
From the hidden
The hidden mic.
MC, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you revive Bienvenida? Because I felt like there's so much that I wanted to know, so much more. And
Wow, she's an amazing character. She's a historical character, Bienvenida, one of the people in the book, the second wife of the dictator. And when he disposed of her and married, her name was erased, all these schools, avenues, everything. And she was sent into exile. And she wasn't a political casualty. She was a romantic casualty of the dictator. And it's a mystery how such a good woman, because from what people I interviewed, from what I read, she was a really kind, good woman. And she married the devil incarnate. I mean, how did this happen? And she was really in love with him. I mean, I believe that. So, yeah, her story, you know, is I'm still Pepito's going to tell. Oh, I'm giving away. Yeah, Pepito. Yeah, there's someone that picks up on the story. But by the way, there is a wonderful novela. I don't know if you read Spanish by Manuel Rueda called Bienvenida a la Noche, and it's a kind of memoir novel. It's beautiful. It's very short, and it's about the night that she meets him and falls in love with him. It's called Bienvenida la Noche, and you get inklings of what's going to happen. But it's told from the child's point of view because he was actually from the same town as Bienvenida and remembers her as a kid. Bienvenida la Noche. Okay. So
All
thank
right.
you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you for this. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. Let's give them another big hand. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll see the stage.
Inciting the crowd. Thank you.